It is 10 o'clock, but I don't think we have everyone yet. I'm actually expecting Rob Wilton because I saw that he submitted some slides. So maybe we should hold off for another minute or two. Hopefully he'll join. Okay, I think we have most everybody now. Welcome. This is the NetConf and NetMod joint virtual interim. The slide says NetConf, sorry about that. Copy paste from previous virtual interim. So Per and I are on as NetConf chairs, and Benoit and Med are on as NetInMop chairs. And I see Mahesh AD is on, and that is a pretty full house as far as that goes. As always, there's the note well, and I'm not to interpret the meaning of this, but it's many times said that you should be aware of the fact that contributions made during this interim are considered, it's a contribution to the IETF. There's also a note really well, which, again, I shouldn't interpret to a great degree, but it has more to do about us treating each other professionally as we have this call. Well, the first line here says that we're unsure if the session will be recorded, but I believe it is recorded. At least the last interim that we did late last year was recorded, so I do believe this is recorded. Nonetheless, please help with the note-taking. I believe in the upper corner or the top of the page, there's a note-taking tool, so you can click on that and help with the note-taking. That'd be great. And last slide, which is, at least from me, is the agenda. This is the same agenda that was originally published for those that were involved with the doodle poll. It's exactly the same text that was in that original doodle poll. I think there was some discussion as to whether or not this is, completely accurate. I don't want to really get, focused on, if we're inbounds or out of bounds. The goal is to help the INMOP and NetConf working groups, proceed with the publication of a variety of documents that are trying to update Yang Push Publishing, and to make that, basically telemetry analytics a more successful story. Okay, so that is it from the agenda. I do believe there's some extra slides that were prepared by the INMOP chairs. So should I bring those up, or can the INMOP chairs do it themselves? Or I don't know. Oh, and also, I'm unsure what is the sequence of, there's like 5 or 6 different slides that have been submitted, and I don't know what is the order of those slides. So if someone has an order, or maybe the order can be posted to the chat window, so I can do that. Okay, great. I see Matt is trying to prepare slides. Okay, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Kent. I'm just trying to load the slide that you have preloaded.
Med, were you going to present slides?
Yeah, if you can just please share the ones that are already preloaded, that would be just
Oh, okay.
convenient for
Sorry
everyone.
about that.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah,
hear you.
thank you.
Also, Holger, I think your microphone is on. Do you mean to be?
Yeah, so thank you, thank you, Ken. So yeah, I would say we have prepared with Benoit. It's just one slide, yeah, just to remind, I would say, the context of this. I would say this joint meeting, so that because some of the participants may not be aware of the work which is done in the NMOP. Next slide, please. So basically, that just to remain in the context here is that the NMOP working group is chartered to, I would say, to run a limited set of the experiments, and one of them is the Yang push integration with the various message brokers there. Kafka was the starting point, but other forms that can be I would say taken into account. And with that in mind, one item which is really really explicit and specific in the charter and included in the working group chart is that we need to be pragmatic, just focusing on what we can get in achievable short time frame, not long transformation of the architectures. And as part of that, the working group is trying to reuse as much as possible the various pieces that were developed in the IETF in the last years. However, even we have that pragmatic approach, it happens that there are some gaps in terms of the integration approach and also the in terms of specification that are needed to provide something which is really an MVP working on for that part. And there are at least few normative dependencies that we have in that working document in which that will be focusing on in this interim. So the goal that we wanted to, and that's why we have approached the Kent and Perd, who kindly accepted to organize all of this. Many thanks to them. Is one of the goals that we wanted to achieve as an outcome of this meeting today is to have a clear plan to unlock the current NMOP document and to agree on the next steps so that we can proceed with the publication of the document and also achieve one of the milestones we have in the NMOP. So at least for the NMOP working, we cannot develop specifications and extensions on the protocols that are in the NetConf. So this is really at the hand of the NetConf, and the NetConf will be controlling all of these pieces. But we just wanted to provide this input for the working group so that to be aware of the motivation and the context of this work. That's the main messages we wanted to convey here. I don't know if Benoit has other comments to add. But we just wanted this to be provided as input. Yes, Benoit?
No, this was perfect, Matt. I believe that you're ready to become AD.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I see Tomas posted he proposed a sequence of slides, so I'll prepare the next slide. Here we go.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Kent. And Matt and Benoit. Next slide, please.
I just passed slide control to you, so you should be able to do it yourself.
Let me check. Yes, I do. Perfect. Thanks. So this is for this document, the agenda items. So we are going first through some architecture overview and especially also relationship to the other notification and the capabilities documents. So we see the dependencies among the documents. Then we go briefly through some recent changes, which are mostly also related in document updates on the notification and capability side. Then same also we go in the notification versioning. There were in version 07 some things which being updated there. Then the planned hackathon activities and also some final overview and then the handover to the other document. The goal for this document in this interim meeting is that we establish a common understanding on how this document is related to the other notification and capabilities document, get current overview about the status and which are the current blocking points. So this is the overview of the architecture. On the right-hand side, I listed the sections from the document, and I'm focusing on the relationship towards the other notifications and capabilities documents. So in section 4.1, the Young Push subscription, which is in the architecture title, in the architecture drawing at the bottom left. There basically we are having a relationship towards the capabilities documents. So capabilities first needs to be from the Young Push publisher discovered. And there are three kinds of capabilities. One is about what can be subscribed. So basically, what are the XPaths, and also for each XPath, what are the whenever an XPath supports on change or periodical subscription, and in periodical subscription in which interval it can be subscribed. That's part of the RFC 91-96 document. Then the second aspect is for configured subscription, we have the choice of different transport protocols, but also encoding and encryption. That's part of the Young Push transport capabilities document. And then last but not least, we have the notification extensions. So basically the notification envelope, which whenever it is supported or not. So that's the capabilities part. Then on the Yang publisher side, so that's at the bottom right, section 4.2, we have the relationship towards the different transport protocols. So that's UDP notif, distributed notif, and HTTPS notif. And then basically the notification envelope. So basically how the notification header is being crafted. And there we have the hostname, sequence number, extensions, and the observation time stamping. Then on the opposite side, so further up, we have the Young Push receiver, and the main goal on the Young Push receiver side at the beginning with the subscription started or the subscription state change notification messages, subscription state changes can be discovered there by looking at the XPath subtree filter, the model name, revision label, and the Young library content ID. And then based on that information and through the Young library and the Young library augmented by extension, basically the Young schema tree can be discovered, and then the schemas can be obtained and registered into the Young schema registry. Then further up the chain, when we go towards the Young message broker consumer, here we have in RFC 7950 a definition how any data can be validated, or we have a definition that basically says that any data validation shall be done outbound and not it is currently not described in the document. And with the draft El Hassani, any data validation, we are describing a way how any data can be validated. Then on the Yang data consumer side, here, thanks to the hostname, sequence number, and event time information from the notif envelope, loss and serialization delay can be measured. And then last but not least, in the Yang data storage at the very top, basically the indexing of the time series information in the notification message can be done based on the observation timestamp. So that's in a nutshell how those different notification and capabilities document are the different properties are being used in the different steps of the architecture. Now. So next, I'm going briefly through some changes in the last revision. So since the notif envelope, the young push transport capabilities, and the notification versioning was updated, we were incorporating also these updates in this document. We have some editorial updates in the area of the young push receiver and the young data consumer section. Here, mainly about how we were more detailed describing how the subscription state changes can be observed, and also how basically the loss of messages and also the delay of the notification messages can be measured across the data processing chain. For the next step, we are looking forward for review and comments, and also we are going to publish before IETF 122 the message broker message schema. So that's the schema between the message broker producer and the consumer side. Here, just a small information, what are the changes on the notification versioning side. So we added the so-called Young Library Content ID, which, and with that, basically, we are also able to cover another corner case. So if basically the subscribed XPath, the Yang module there, imports other Yang module, and in those Yang modules there would be changes over the software upgrades or over the life cycle. Then with the change of the Young Library Content ID, we could also recognize those cases. This was also raised by Andy Biermann on the mailing list. Then the upcoming IETF 122 hackathon. So we are continuing on the Yang push implementations. The main focus in this hackathon will be in the area of the notif envelope. So we have several implementations who are or already did the implementation. And also we have the first implementations which supports the capabilities. And we're going to validate that throughout the hackathon. Then here on this slide, we want to show that the document, the Young push observation time, has been merged into the NETCONF notif envelope. So we have one less document on the list. And for today, further presentations will focus on the notif envelope and the Young push transport capabilities, and also on the Young push observability document. So the current blocking points are the notif envelope and the draft Young push transport capabilities. The implementations are on the way, but the working group adoption is still pending. So for reaching the MVP1 timeline, which is Q4 2025, the implementers are concerned about the current working group progress. And without having a working group adoption call before IETF 122, authors are concerned that there isn't enough time to discuss normative changes before the software commit windows are closing. And MVP 2 and 3 are currently scheduled for Q2, Q4 2026. That's it from the introduction side. Are there any questions or comments?
Hi, I have my hand raised as a contributor, or actually, no, I'm sorry, as a chair. You said it already, the envelope document is one less document that's in the queue, and I just wanted to highlight, I think for Mahesh's sake, that this is the consolidation that we were asking for before. Recall that there was concern that there was too many small documents going to the ISG. And so there's a request to reduce the number of documents, and that's been done. Thank you. And then on that last slide that you were just on a moment ago, I actually didn't think I had a question, but I do now. It says 2026. Do you mean that or 2025?
So for the MVP1, which is relevant for the envelope and the capabilities, it's Q4 2025. And then for MVP 2 and 3, where we have, like, for instance, CBOR related things, or also the Young Push observability document, this is terminated towards Q2, Q4 2026. So it's a stepped approach. We are not implementing everything at once.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yes, so Thomas, first of all, my apologies for not having responded to that email thread on consolidating drafts. But yes, as Ken said, I think this goes towards reducing the number of drafts that are what I consider related, and therefore would do well to be in a single document. So thank you for doing that.
Perfect. Thanks as well.
Go ahead, Robert.
Hi, Thomas. Is my audio working?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Just going back to your slides, you had one on content ID. I was just thinking through that a bit, and effectively, I can see the advantage of having the content ID in your message in the sense that you will get a notification whenever anything changes in Yang library. The downside is you'll get that value will change if anything changes in Yang library. So effectively, you won't know whether any of the content under that given subscription has changed. You just get told something's changed. Yeah. And which is fine. I think we should caveat that or be aware of that. And then my other question is and hence, do you still need the revision and module name and revision label? Is that still helpful to have that information if you've got the content ID serving as like a higher level version of that? It still makes sense to include it. Was one question I had. I'm not sure I feel that strongly on this. And I think when we come to Yang Push Lite, we should maybe look to see if there's a more optimal way of doing this potentially. But
exactly, I think you're raising the point. Whenever we want to do a Yang library content ID per XPath, per subscription, and then I fully agree. Then the Yang module name, revision label, it is no longer needed because now we have it basically compressed to a content ID. Then it makes perfectly sense. However, it's always a trade-off, where the complexity versus reusing some existing mechanism. So at the moment, we are just reusing an existing mechanism. It's not perfect. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Good. Then shall we go next?
The next slides.
Yeah, so hello, I'm Alex. I am presenting on behalf of the authors. Thank you for the control again. So just a reminder of what we are proposing here. So this internet draft is proposing a new structure for Yang Push notifications that is applicable for both configured subscriptions and dynamic subscriptions. And the idea of this, what we call notification envelope, is that we are able to add metadata to the Yang Push notifications. Currently, as an example, we have the hostname and sequence number that are sent over the different collectors with the contents of the actual notification, the payload. So in this internet draft, what we are proposing is an option to opt in to this new notification envelope, so that the collectors that only support the older header defined by 5277 can still use the older headers. We are proposing a way to discover which metadata is sent with this new header using the IETF notification capabilities model. This header is implemented in YANG 1.1 so that any new extension in the feature can use YANG itself to define this metadata. And we are defining for each encoding how it is encoded to also remove the gap on the under specification of JSON and CWOR encoding with the older header. And as a first approach, we are defining the first basic extensions, which are the hostname and the sequence numbers. And in this new iteration, as I will explain later on, the observation time. Just a reminder of the feedback from the last IETF. So we got feedback that it was a bit too complex to make this envelope header on a per subscription basis, and we were suggested to make it global. Kind of the same on which headers will be pushed from the node. So we were suggested to maybe let the client discover what is supported via the model and therefore push. Don't let the collector configure which headers they want. On a smaller note, that we needed a YANG structure rather than a notification to not fall under the current notification specification. And so far, we have had plenty of support and multiple contributors already agreed to implement this internet draft. So changes since this last iteration, we have proposed a way to enable and disable globally on the router via an RPC. We will discuss later whether this is the right approach. The second one is that we have added the timestamp extension that was coming from the YANG push observation time draft as a new extension to this envelope draft. And then a few smaller changes, somehow editorial. We have changed the XML namespace using a YANG, let's say, using the YANG best practices. And also added a few sentences such as that the header should be placed with the metadata first and then the payload. So the idea of today's meeting is having a conclusion on whether the current approach is on the right track. So right now, as I will explain later, we are using an RPC as a central point to enable and disable this metadata. This envelope, sorry. We will see that we have some trade-off to do when implemented it this way. And secondly, we also want to confirm that there is also interest on the observation timestamp and whether the current approach is the right one. So on the first proposal, so rather than going on a per subscription, right now we are suggesting to use an RPC to enable and disable the envelope. When it is enabled and disabled, it is global on the node, so all the subscriptions will receive the older header or the new notification envelope. We are adding the enable notification envelope on the subscriptions container as a read-only node for monitoring. And what we are proposing is that this RPC must be used before the creation of any dynamic subscriptions. We will see later on, but what this means is that if existing dynamic subscriptions are already pushing notifications, the router will trigger an invalid notification envelope config. The reason of doing that is the following. So since the young push notification envelope is applicable for both configured subscriptions and dynamic subscriptions, for configured subscriptions, there is no issue, right? So we have the operator who configures via the RPC that they don't want the new notification envelope. In this case, the router will send the old header to a collector. It will manage multiple subscriptions, sending to different collectors if they want. And when at some point they are already upgraded their collectors and they are able to collect the envelope header, they can switch it globally on the router, and the router will send the notification envelope header. However, on dynamic subscriptions is a bit different. We send the notifications over the same session that we are configuring the subscription. So in this case, if we have only one subscription, the operator or management node configures telling the router, I don't want this notification envelope, so I will receive the 5277 header. At the same, similarly to configured subscriptions, the router would be able to manage different dynamic subscriptions. So they could have different operators or different management servers or orchestrators that configure themselves each with their own configuration. And it felt very strange if, for example, one of the nodes, at some point they say, okay, now I want the new notification envelope, right? Because if it is globally, this would mean that I am impacting also other collectors that they themselves configure to receive the older header. That is the reason why we are centralizing all the requests via the RPC. And we are stating in the draft that this RPC can only be switched when there are no existing dynamic subscriptions. So that when an operator or a management node wants this notification envelope globally on the node, first we need to remove all the let's say dynamic subscriptions before configuring it globally. So yes, here again, I'm not sure this is the best approach.
Alex, there's a couple in queue from for the previous slide. Maybe we should take those questions.
Yeah, sure. I was thinking of after this slide, but yeah, we can surely do that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, Rob, please.
Okay. Yes. Hi, Alex. I can see what you're trying to achieve here, but it seems like a mightily complex way of doing it. And the question I have in my head is do we need this complexity? So, for me, the very simplest approach here, and I know you're going to have a poll on this, is just to have a single config option for a device that says either you enable this notification envelope or you don't. And you could restrict it to Yang push if you wanted, if that made life a bit easier, rather than having it globally. And I think that gives a fairly clear answer. So if you go to your next slide again, sorry, what I would say is if you were to change the configured value here, then I would automatically just kill any dynamic subscriptions, and then when they reconnect, you could tell them and just give them the new notification format. And in terms of I think it's good that you're considering sort of upgradability here, but the reality is I think that there's going to be a software change in the device to enable these anyway, which makes it very likely in my mind that the subscription is going to be teared down anyway, regardless. So my view is that an operator is likely to be able to manage this by having a single global flag, and the benefits of having that global configured flag outweighs the complexity that you're describing here. So that's just my thoughts. Thanks.
Okay. So yes, at the beginning, my idea was having your approach, but when I was trying to manage current subscriptions and new existing ones and so on, I saw that I was ending up with a complex solution. We can surely state in the draft that there is a global switch. When someone sets this global switch, all the subscriptions are restarted and using the new header. Then, happy to do that. Rashad?
Rashad, you're next in queue.
Yeah, so I had the same kind of comment as Rob was saying. I was curious why a configure a read-write node wasn't being used for that. So Rob has already asked that. I still have a question on the bottom right. So I was curious, here you show two collectors, but if say the bottom collector was not present, would that RPC succeed or would it still fail?
It would be succeed because there is no existing. So there are only the only one dynamic subscription at the end.
Okay, so when you say no existing, you mean no other existing. Okay, good.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So
Okay.
the difficult here was that in dynamic subscription, the operator, let's say, is managing their own subscription, right? So if I have two different subscriptions, each subscription has their own requirements, and I am changing a global, let's say, config switch, it felt strange that I was impacting also the other guy. And that's the only reason I am triggering this error at the end. Thomas.
That's good, thank you.
Just for clarification, I think what Rob suggested before in your next slide is the option number 2, if I'm not mistaken.
It's the number 2, but even it's a bit more than number 2. But yeah, I will explain later.
Perfect, thanks.
So, Alex, on slide number 7, please. The RPC is the only way to enabling, disabling the envelope. What would happen, let's say, in 10 years from now, where we've got software that has got this envelope by default? Does it mean that we still need to have the RPC, or we could just upgrade the router and it's there? Do we still need the RPC?
Yes. So that's also a drawback of using an RPC. So my understanding here is that if you have an RPC and you have a new router, you are not able to just copy paste the configuration, and you would need to still send this RPC explicitly to get the notif envelope.
Thank you.
That's something I was trying to discuss later anyway, but yes. Kent, maybe you want to.
Sorry, I'm just kind of thinking about what Benoit said. And by the way, Benoit, you're still in queue. So having an RPC, if for a collector that only wanted to have configured subscriptions, I mean, it seems like you would want to be able to configure the goal of getting the new envelope. I mean, why would it have to be an RPC in that case? I mean, like, it seems like it should be configurable for a configured subscription. But also to Benoit's comment, I'm actually, and I mentioned this on List before, but I'm hoping that the Yang Push Lite effort will move forward and essentially say that this is the only envelope. It doesn't even try to support 5277. It only supports this new header. And and thereby all the collected, or there'd be no need for the RPC. I think the RPC might be short-lived as a way of, to get us over this transition between the 5277 and to Yang push light. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Anyway, Rob already said that. The Yang push light was going to anyway support only the new header. On the first comment, I totally agree. The only reason I implemented the RPC was to be able to match configure subscription and dynamic subscriptions that have already the older header. I agree, it is not the best solution. So that's why I wanted to discuss this on this slide, but you already, I think the group understood the drawback of having this RPC call. So this is regarding the operational concerns. That's something that Benoit already raised earlier, that an operator having, when he's deploying a new node and, for example, they are copy pasting an edit config from another router, they wouldn't be able to just start the router and having this notif envelope because of the implementation of the RPC. This solvable from multiple perspectives. We can make again the enable notification envelope writable and remove the RPC. That's the number 2. Or number 3 is reverting back to configurable per subscription, so that each subscription can manage their own, which adds complexity. So far, the comments that came from Rob was even a bit further. So my understanding is that it's number 2. So we are able to configure the enable notification envelope switch, but also adding normative text that any existing subscription, either configured or dynamic, they are restarted and they will send the notification envelope header in this way. That's my current understanding. Yes, Thomas?
Just one comment on the third item. So today, basically Yang push, so 8639, 8641, we do these things per subscription. So I understood from implementers like Rob that such enhancements to be configured for each and every subscription is rather complex. So I think here we need to ask ourselves whether we should keep that complexity for the moment and then resolve it in Yang push light, or if we should already resolve it now. And that's basically the choice between, I think, option 2 or 3.
I was just going to respond back to Thomas on that one, if that's okay. So I think for us, where we are writing new implementation now, and we know that the demand is only for the new envelope header, is that even if this became a per subscription configuration, we'd effectively, and if it's default to being off, which would be the backwards compatible way, then we would just mandate that you'd have to set it to true before we'd add any subscription to come up. So it effectively still ends up being a global flag for us, and the only value you've ever set it to is true, and it just becomes a piece of configuration that's mandatory for you to enter for us to allow to bring up a subscription. But that's because we don't support Yang push today, and we don't support the existing notification envelope, or not in a shipping release.
Makes sense. So that's the first point, which I think we have mostly the opinion on the group. And then secondly was Jesper. Okay. we cannot hear if you was wanting to talk.
He was having microphone issues earlier, but I'm thinking that he'd probably want to mention that he started a poll, a show of hands poll. Yeah, as that's what he's saying in the chat window. So if everyone can take an opportunity to look at the poll and.
Yeah. So note that number 2 is the one proposing from Rob. So it's enable notification envelope, and then but also restarting all the subscriptions.
It's a little bit tricky because the way that you structured the question, Alex, is like a preference between 3 choices, but the show of hands poll really is just a binary choice. We can only ask a yes, no type question. So I think.
Yeah, so my understanding of this question is whether the number 2 is the best option or not. Right?
I think so. I'm unfortunately can't hear Per. Let's see if he's trying to text me.
But yes, so yeah, I was trying to make the solution simple, but when I was managing more than one subscription, I was a bit puzzled. But yes, restarting the subscription might simplify the solution.
Okay, so Per wrote to the chat window, this is intended to be 1 + 2 versus 3. Okay, so there's a new poll now. Hopefully this is more clear. What global option is preferable? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it is very useful feedback. I will change the direction of this and state that when there is a change, it is global, and all the current subscriptions are killed and restarted if they need it, basically. And then a second one is the default enable notif envelope, which was trying to solve the RPC call, the complexities of the RPC call. But here also maybe feedback from the group whether this default value, it should be true or false. At the beginning, it was set to false to not break collectors from that are using the older header. So when we have a software upgrade, for example, that uses this draft, they will continue still sending the old header to not break it. But yeah, here again, if there are any feedback on whether this default value should be set to true or false, we are open here.
So I was just going to comment on this one. So I'm somewhat ambivalent on this issue because it feels to me that the right thing to do here is to have it default to be false because that's the backwards compatible thing. But as I mentioned earlier, for our implementation, we will mandate that if it is default to false, you have to configure it to true before we allow any subscription to come up. So effectively, it becomes something that we only support if it's set to true. I don't know if there are existing deployments of Yang push that this is going to be an issue for or not. I don't have that visibility in, so I'm somewhat ambivalent.
Excellent.
So yeah, my comment is somewhat similar to what Rob just said. if you go to enable or change this, say, to a default value of true, would this be a software upgrade where anyway the subscriptions are the existing subscriptions are terminated? Therefore, when the new subscription request comes, it'll always see the default value as true.
Yeah.
So from an operator's perspective, normally if you build up a new router, you put it in a day zero config. And if not, normally we deploy it directly or after a software upgrade or with a software upgrade. So I would tend to leave the default on RFC 5277, so we do not break something, and we would enable it then anyways via the config.
Yeah, this makes sense.
Is it my turn? Yep. So regarding the default, would that default apply to all of Yang Push or just for Yang Push Lite?
To all the Yang Push.
Okay.
My understanding of the Yang Push Lite is that this notif envelope will be enabled, but you would not be able to get the older header. So this notif envelope is for all Yang Push.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Oh. Not hearing.
Per, are you trying to say something? We don't hear you. Mahesh, you want to go?
Yeah, so this is more a follow-up to all this comment from our operator's perspective. If the idea is that you set it to a default value of false and then configure it later, do you have an opinion as to what happens to existing subscriptions? Because now the chances that you might have the older subscriptions will be there. And what happens to those sessions? You might have to jump the queue, I guess. Or you can answer it in chat.
Alex, did you want to reply?
No, I was thinking because that's true that I don't have the use case here. If it is defaulting to true, what happens to existing subscriptions? But yeah, no, I don't have the answer to that. So
okay, Benoit, you're next in queue.
One clarification, please, because the default true or false, it seemed that I received two different answers. One from Alex, which is this is for anything that deals with Yang Push, and one's from Rob on the chat telling no, this default is only for Yang Push. Yang Push Lite should be on by default. So I'm slightly confused by those two apparently conflicting answers.
So this envelope can be used on the current, let's say, implementation of Yang Push, right? So you are able to get for current implementations already that are using RFC 5277. They have this switch to use this notification header, this new notification envelope. My understanding on Yang Push Lite is that you won't be able to have this switch. So Yang Push Lite is removing, in a way, this config switch and is sending the notification envelope by default, but not even by default. It's mandatory by the YAML push light specification.
Thank you.
Can I just also add a quick comment here? So answering back to Benoit, is my plan with YAML push light, and this is to be discussed later, as one thing to flag up is, at the moment I've created a separate YAML model for that, and hence it's separate configuration, a separate protocol logically. So whatever we do for YAML push doesn't have to be bound for YAML push light. So we can choose different defaults, things like that, because the fact that you configure it separately will solve that issue.
So if I understand correctly, Rob, the default we're talking here on slide 9 will be irrelevant for YAML push light because it's going to always be taken into account. So we should pay attention not to have two conflicting default values.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah. Okay, so so far, my understanding is the safer value is setting this to false so that we have backwards compatibility with the RFC 5277. So I will do that unless there is any objection. Okay. So let's move on to the next change. So on the next one is regarding merging the different drafts. So we have the observation timestamp, which represents either the time where the metrics were pulled from the data store, or the time where an event occurred, for example, on change subscriptions. In this case, this is an extension. The current approach is extending the YAML push header, but because these metrics or events are pushed only through the push change update and the push update notifications. What we are proposing in this draft is extending the YAML push header as it was on the draft observation timestamp, and using the same mechanisms proposed in the notif envelope. So extending the IETF notification capabilities to know whether this header is supported or not. So here again to the group, whether this is the right approach or should we change anything. So I would like to hear any comments or we should continue using this extension as it is now.
So my view is it's right to merge these in. I think with finding a new header here, we can include these as default fields. So one thing I did notice in the draft is that it uses a YAML feature for these. I wasn't sure whether that was necessary or not. I don't think it really matters. Maybe it's helpful to clarify, but equally, I would just potentially just include them, because at the end of the day, given it's a notification, you could always just not include them if in a particular case they weren't appropriate. But definitely think merging them in is the right choice, in my opinion.
Okay, so the right choice on integrating this draft, but it's on the approach is also okay. So that's what I understood.
I think so.
Yeah.
So Alex, I'm not sure whether you are asking formally for a poll or whether you were just asking for people to.
So it was kind of. So it was kind of both, right? So I would like to hear whether there are any opinions against or they are agreeing, and maybe at the end of any these opinions, making a poll to confirm that we are taking this approach.
Actually, I might have been just getting myself confused. So I was thinking about the sequence number and host name. So they definitely should be in the base header.
Yes, they are.
For the observation time, so one that's interesting there is in the Yang push light update notification. I've included them directly, so so they'd be part of that update header for Yang push light. So whether that changes what you do here, I don't know. If that makes sense.
Okay, I see. So what you are saying, yeah, is that when Yum push light uses the notification envelope, the host name and sequence number would use the ones that are defined in this draft, and that by using the observation timestamp on the push change update, it would not impact you because you already have this timestamp integrated in the new notification.
Correct. It's a different notification in a different module, so that would be okay. It wouldn't be impacted, but it just wouldn't use that part of this draft. So if it was merged into here, I think in future, if Yang push light ended up replacing Yang push, you'd still end up with this sort of bit of text or code that's sort of dead and is referring to an older protocol. That's anything to be aware
of. Yes, then yeah, I would also agree that this is the right approach.
I think it was maybe in the last meeting that Thomas, that you had clarified that there's certain headers that are lost when they're stored in a time series database. In one clarification I was looking for, in this header format, are the base headers maintained when the event is stored in the time series database, or is it lost?
Yes, so in the previous slide deck, I was mentioning the time series database, the overview slide, the very last item on that list. So the observation timestamp is being used for indexing the data.
Okay, thanks.
So yeah, so far at least I haven't got any objections. So I do think there is a consensus on the group that this is the right approach. I think that Rob's comments on Yang push light also are a way forward of using this. So I think we don't need a pull. Okay, so last minor changes. So the XML namespace, I have changed it to IETF YP notifications instead of using the all XML notification 2.0. There are some editorial changes, but also I have added some text to say that all the headers should be placed at the beginning of the notification header, so that the collectors receive those headers first. Yeah, Rob.
So this is sort of a minor comment, really. I just wondered whether, like, the notification contents element could be given a shorter name, given that every structure has them. I wondered whether it could just be like contents or something, or something similar, or message or something. I don't know, because it's all within a notification envelope anyway, and maybe it doesn't matter when we get to binary code. It just feels slightly gratuitous to have a long name there. I don't know. That was just an opinion.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe I change it to contents.
That would work with me, but I don't know if others have different views.
Okay. And so, yeah. So far, where we are, right? Now we already know that it is scoped to Yang push. It is using a structure. We are following Yang guidelines for the XML namespace. We have integrated the host name and sequence number, and on this iteration, the observation timestamp. And yeah, so far all issues are more or less fixed. We've got some feedback on this interim meeting, so I will push those changes before the IETF. I will try to do that. I'd like to thank also the different contributors on the list and also offline, Chifan, Andy, Pierre, and Richard. And this draft, we were already suggested to initiate a working group adoption. We were hoping also that before the IETF meeting, there would be this working group adoption call. So I think that would be it. Yeah, so that would be all from my side. So
Alex, just one clarification before you go. On slide 12, or maybe it was 13. Yeah, so for these two drafts, you have draft tgraph netconf notif sequencing and draft tgraph netconf yang push observation time. Is this one draft, or is this consolidated in one draft, or are these two separate drafts?
So these two drafts are consolidated into the notif envelope. So we have only one notif envelope, which already integrates the content of notif sequencing and yang push observation time.
Yeah. Okay. So this was, I guess, part of the collapsing of the two drafts. The second was the point about, yes, I think my understanding was that we were waiting for this interim meeting to happen before the adoption pool was initiated, but I don't want to speak for the chairs. But that's the idea for going forward.
Yeah, that was the idea. Yes. Okay. We'll after this interim, I mean, depending any other outcome, but we'll start the adoption call later this week.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, Ken. So that would be everything from my side.
Okay, great. So we'll move on to the next slides. Thank you.
Perfect.
I'll just ask one last time if you can hear me now.
We can hear you, Per.
Thank you very much. Sorry.
No worries.
All right, I'm going to pass slide control to you, Thomas. There you go.
Perfect. I got it. So this is about Yang notification transport capabilities. So I will briefly explain how Yang transport capabilities is related to the message broker integration architecture, some of the changes since the 0.0 version, which we presented at last IETF. The current document that started.
Thomas, we just lost your audio. Are you still speaking?
Yeah, I was just blocked for a few seconds. So now, okay.
Okay. Maybe go back to the beginning.
So it's about how the transport capabilities is related to the Yang push message broker integration. The last changes since we presented at IETF 121, the current document status, and the next steps. So it's related to the capabilities discovery. There, besides what is being supported at the subscription, and also all the extensions we have in the notification here about what different transport protocols are being supported, not only the transport protocols, but also the encodings and also the encryption for the configured subscription. And the changes from the last version presented at IETF 121, we got feedback from Matt. Thanks a lot, Matt. We updated the terminology section just to be more clear what subscriber, publisher, and receiver exactly means, and also client and server. And to be aligned with RFC 9645, which is the IETF TLS server, we have now 4 TLS and DTLS. For both of them, we distinguish between version 1.2 and version 1.3. I have included the diff. They're pretty straightforward. So current status, this is not really a new document. It replaces the NETCONF data export capabilities previously discussed. Just to remember, at IETF 107, the question in NETCONF was being raised about mandatory encoding. In the poll, the working group decided not for a mandatory encoding, to have the market decide which encoding. And just for the record, in this choice, CBOR was not mentioned back then. Today, in section 7 of RFC 8639, basically there we mandate a default encoding, and in the errata, which is currently held for document update, there we the intention is to add a capability to make it discoverable. So we raised, and I think this is a typo, it's 121 on the mailing list, whenever this document is actually addressing the discoverability requirements. We got feedback from Kent and Envy, and in the next slide I will ask also others from the working group whether this is the right way to go or not. So currently we are aware of 4 implementers who are working currently on an implementation. Some of the implementations will be already ready at the IETF 122 hackathon, and it's part of the scope that we are testing the implementations. The question we raised on the mailing list is, technically speaking, we have these 4 options, and it goes back to what I was explaining before, that initially the working group has decided for not having a mandatory encoding for the transport protocols for configured subscription, and then basically when not having mandatory encoding, the other option is to make it discoverable, and then discoverable via RFC 9196 based capabilities. So here it would be great to hear further feedback from others from the working group, whether the 4th options is the best way to go. So I see Kent.
Yes, thank you. The mandatory encoding discussion was with regards to UDP notif, like HTTPS notif, and maybe other future notifs will have, they might be able to do self-discovery, the publisher, negotiating or handshaking with the collector as to what encoding to use. But apparently that's not possible with UDP notif. So really the mandatory, or whether or not there's a mandatory encoding for UDP notif was what that discussion was about. It doesn't really apply to other notif transports.
Right. I think you're raising the point about the mechanism of how the encoding and also security is being discovered. So in here, that document basically is linking to the RFC 9196, where we already have for Yang push other let's say discovery capabilities, for instance, which paths can be subscribed, and also the NETCONF notif envelope is also tying in there. So basically, we have one place where, regardless if it's the subscription part, notification part, or the transpond part, or the encryption part, everything can be discovered in one tree.
Sorry, just jumping back into you. I wonder if there's an overlap of any sort. What I recall is the 8639 Yang data model had in it, I think there was a leaf called encoding, and it was an optional to configure leaf. But now this draft is introducing another mechanism for encoding I don't want to use that word encoding, for setting the encoding. Is there any contention between the two? If they give different results, how does that work out?
Which leaf are you referring to in 8639?
Okay, I don't have it in front of me. Just a second. I'll leave queue and come back. I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. I might remember this because I was looking at this text recently. I have a feeling that it might say in 8639 that each transport must either have a mechanism or specify what the default encoding is. I have a feeling it had text something to that effect.
Yeah, that's what it says. Yes.
But that's the section 7 of 8639 I'm referring here, right? And then the errata, held for document status.
So Tom, so go to your next one on the options. I definitely think solving this in Yang push light is obvious actually, and when I was putting the text together forward and trying to merge it together, this was one of the areas I flagged that this particular issue. In terms of what you want to know is what do we do before we get to Yang push light, and I think for me the pragmatic answer is we try and do whatever we can to progress this without doing extra busy work. So at a minimum, I think having the capabilities is fine for UDP notif and hoping it doesn't come up, but there's a risk this comes up in ISG review and somebody says, oh, I've read Yang push or 3639, it says 8639, you're not doing this. I take that risk. And if push comes to shove, that would probably mean you'd then have to update that document and say, you don't need to do this for UDP notif or something like that. But I would try not worry about it for the moment. It's my view.
And if I understand correctly, Rob, that you would also say basically that Yang push light is basing all the capability discovery based on RFC 9196. So that.
Yes, I'm not sure I'd go quite as far as that. Maybe, I mean, there might be some other cases where you want to do transport discovery, maybe, but certainly the bit where you sort of mandating you had to do a particular way. I was hoping to loosen that text or at least get it close to what we actually want to do. Exactly. And yes, for Yang push light, I was definitely wanted to use the capabilities as one of the primary mechanisms.
Absolutely, I think we're on the same page. So that basically, I think in a nutshell is that the errata 6111, which is currently held for document update, is really reflecting what we are doing with the Yang push light document, right? So this is basically included then in the Young push slide.
But it might also, for your question on your document here, I think it's going to come down to, or the UDP Notif one really, it's going to come down to the chairs and the AD to say what is the right path forward. I think it's that at that level is my,
I see.
my thoughts.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, sorry.
Sure. Yeah, I see Alex.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. So, sorry. Yeah, so I just wanted to comment because my understanding of 8639, you have a leaf encoding, so that you are able to configure which encoding you want, and even monitor the which subscriptions are using which encoding, right? But you are not able to discover what is the router able to send out. So I think we are misunderstanding a bit how we are using the encoding leaf. Because my understanding on YangPush is that you are able to configure it, but you are not able to know what is supported on the node.
Exactly.
And that's what this draft is trying to solve. Regarding on HTTPS Notif, it's the other way around. So the authors are trying to get the capabilities from the collector, not the router. In this case, the transport capabilities is rather for the router, so that the collectors are able to know this router is able to push information on both UDP Notif, HTTPS Notif, and for each transport, what encodings they are able to do. So I just wanted to clarify that because my understanding on 8639 is that you are not able to know which encodings you are, at least what is supported on the router, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so as an author of the HTTPS Notif draft, I'll just say that that's correct. It doesn't itself indicate what encodings the router supports, or I should say the publisher supports, but presumably that could be done through features as well. It's not currently specified. There are no features specified, but it could be done. Features could be augmented in.
But so far the features cannot be exported via NETCONF, right? That's something I am missing.
They are. Whenever a client connects to a server, it can get the Yang library, and from that know which features are implemented.
Okay, then I need to read a bit about that. Thank you.
So one clarification, Alex, I was looking for is the idea is that there is one collector and you have several publishers. Is it that we want to know and understand the capabilities of the collector, or do we want to understand the capabilities of the publisher? Because if you have different publishers having different capabilities, then I guess the collector would have to normalize what kind of data is being sent.
Yeah, so I think there are two different problems to solve, right? In this case, what we are trying to do is know what is supported on a router. So we are implementing a mechanism to know from a collector side, asking the router what is supported. On HTTPS Notif, it's the other way around. So it's for the publisher to know the collector what is supported. To my understanding, at least from operators, to automate data collection, you need a mechanism to know what to ask the routers what is supported, and then so that the collector can configure, or the orchestrator can configure what subscriptions to implement, right? So that's why, in a way, I see this draft as a gap solver. But yeah.
Okay.
And what I like to add, it's not only about the encoding, but also the encryption. Both needs to be discoverable.
I think the biggest question here is we need to discover capabilities on the router, on the server, sorry. And how do we do it in a generic way? And this is exactly why we created 9196. And there is also in their placeholder structure to discover Yang-related system capabilities for server. And I'm just reading the abstract here. So we need to agree on how we discover those capabilities. There are multiple ways, all right? But I believe that what they're doing in this draft based on 9196 is the right way.
Yeah, I agree with Benoit. My understanding is that currently we have 9196, but we have the capabilities. There is a IANA registry with NETCONF capabilities. And then, so what I got from Kent earlier is that we are able to get the features from Yang library. I think something important from the working group is decide which one is the ultimate, let's say, and which one should be pushed forward, rather than having multiple ways, because otherwise I think it's too diverse to implement, and implementers they don't know which one should be used.
Yeah, I agree with that statement. As from a netmod perspective, this is an ongoing open issue, I believe. Features versus capabilities, they both try to solve a similar problem, and it does get confusing, I believe, because which are you to use. So, but I believe it's been posted that 9196 has been specifically designed for this purpose, so probably it makes sense to use that instead of features.
Good. Shall I continue to the next slide? Or do we still want to discuss on this? So no feedback, then let me go to the next slide. And I think Benoit gave us already the segue. So we want, as a network operator, we want one capability discovery mechanism to automate the Yang push subscription process. Today, this is one of the major pain points of today's legacy non-standard Yang push implementations we have on the market. And here we have a proposal how we address and solve this problem. That's RFC 9196 based, and also considering that this document, which we presented here today, is actually not something new. We already have the ninth version. We consider it as stable, and also we have 4 implementers are on the way of implementing this document. So I think once we resolved whatever we want to have a 9196 based mechanism, I think there is nothing in the way to move forward for the working group adoption call. So I don't know, shall we raise a poll here and ask the working group whether this is the right way forward?
Sure. Did you want to set up a poll?
Sure.
And Tomas, I just want to clarify, you said there's nothing blocking preventing adoption. Do you mean the current version, the revision of the document that's on Data Tracker is good to go, or no
Exactly.
updates? Okay, perfect.
Exactly.
Yep. Okay.
So I'll say it's more feedback needed before adoption call. Is that okay? Thomas?
I would more go whether the discoverability requirements are addressed with this document or not, or whether this document is the right way to go.
Okay. Okay, so I'm closing at 10 yes and 4 no opinion.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. That was all from my side.
Should we move to the next slides now?
I suggest so, yeah.
Am I able to control these remotely, or do I? Oh, yes, I can. Fine. Yes, I can see that. So, okay. This is an update on IETF YangPush Lite in terms of where I've got to. I'll talk quite a lot of detail in terms of the protocols and things, in terms of what changes they're proposing. Happy to have questions and comments at any time. At the moment, it's sort of had some feedback from discussions early on when we discussed this IETF 121, but I've spent quite a lot of time trying to pull like a good starting point of the document together. So I'll just go through some of the early slides presented before to start off with, and then into some more details later on. So first of all, what's the goal here is to try and define a lighter version of YangPush, but it's lighter in terms of actually we strip out some stuff we don't want to implement, but we're also adding on lots of little bells and whistles and tweaks and things as we're all implementing YangPush and as we are trying to deploy it and sort of solve the various problems. So some of the extension drafts that Thomas and friends have been presenting would get pulled into this automatically for this next version of YangPush. For example, like the envelope header will reference that, but we'll make it default to enable that by default. So we're not starting from scratch. This is not a brand new protocol at all. It is like a cut down version of YangPush, but I am starting a new document from scratch rather than doing elsewhere. And the intention here is not to reinvent the wheel, but it is aiming to refine it in quite a lot of little different ways. And that's the feedback I'd like to get today, is to find out whether you agree in terms of the direction I'm going, because now would be a good time to hear that. What about RSC 86, 39 and 41? As you'll see later on, I've used those two documents as the starting point for this. I've taken a large amount of text from those two documents and started that for the YangPush Lite document, and then sort of cut it down to size. GNMI, I haven't considered too much, although I think that the direction of some of the extensions and the way I'm taking it in various places is closer to GNMI in terms of feel in various places as well. So it's possible that what we end up with aligns a bit close to GNMI. Right, so this is just a summary. This was what was presented before. I haven't changed this in IETF 121. It acts as like a good reminder of what I'd said before we were aiming for. So the aim is to sort of remove some of the complex parts, e.g. dampening, event frequency negotiation, the QoS complexities where you could have different receivers and dependencies between them. It adds a common encoding for periodic and on-change messages. It allows the subscriptions to be split up and for a publisher to sort of send separate subtrees in different messages. The proposal is for simplified filtering, so not full XPath and not subtree filtering like a simple path-based one. I've said it aligns with GNMI where appropriate. I think more probably needs to be done there to see if there's anything else we need to tweak it in that direction, but I've not done too much in that this time. Simplified NACAM conformance, that came up. I think that the I can't remember if it's Yang push probably has some quite strict requirements in terms of tearing down trees, tearing down subscriptions if NACAM policies change. I think we need to think carefully about what is pragmatic here and making sure that we don't require like a NACAM check on every single leaf you're being updated and things like that. So I think, so again, we might relax some of that. I would also like to agree a base encoding and filtering and things like that. So again, this document, I think all these sorts of things are open, but I can sort of explain where I am from a starting point. So that's where we got to in IETF 121. And one of the questions that we discussed in quite a lot of detail at the end of that meeting was how to start this work, what's the right document format, and whether this should be done as extensions to RFC 86, 39, and 41, or we should start a new RFC copying the key parts into new documents, or perhaps a small document that defines new functionality and references the existing one. And the conclusion or the references I took out of that meeting was there was a lot of support for actually starting with a new document that documents this whole protocol in its entirety of how it works without having to tie back to 86, 39, and 41. Yes, Rashad, go ahead.
Do you plan to obsolete 86, 39, and 41?
No, not as part of this. I don't think it's necessary. So my plan, I'll talk to this in more detail. The plan is that this lives in a new namespace. So it's a new Yang module with a new, and the notification will exist in the new Yang module as well. And hence you could in theory implement both Yang push and Yang push Lite at the same time. So I've tried to decouple the Yang push implementations and its sort of lifetime and what happens to that versus Yang push Lite. Over time, my expectation is if this gets a lot more traction in the future, we would then potentially mark Yang push as historic or something similar. So that's the aim here, is that we allow flexibility in deployment rather than sort of pushing that way. So so the Yang push Lite starting draft. So I've published, there's a draft will to NetConf Yang observability. I think there's a -01. I published a -00 before the last IETF meeting. There's a -01 that just at the moment has basically all of the RFC 39 and 41 text in. So don't look at that draft, the one that's been published. The one that's in the GitHub repos here that's referenced here is sort of the latest versions document where I've spent a significant amount of time to clean up those sections and pull the text around and restructure the document. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. I will publish this updated version. I was hoping to get some more feedback from some of the other people who are interested in authoring this document and helping co-author it to try and get some of that feedback in first before I publish one before IETF 122. But there will be an updated version before then. So this is a new self-contained document that defines Yang push Lite. It copies a large amount of text from 86, 39, and 41. I've then restructured it. I've tried to reorder the sections. I've tried to simplify them. And because of the split between subscribe notifications and Yang push, it ended up meaning that I rewrote a lot of text and lots of sections. I've kept lots of sections and text, but also rewritten a lot as well. At the same time, I've simplified it. And I've also started pushing in some of the sort of Yang push Lite bits and started deleting it. So the working document, the one that's referenced there, is approximately 100 pages, maybe it's slightly less now. When I was trying to edit it and things like that. But if you want to review it, there's some particular sections I would suggest you focus on. I wouldn't try and read the entire document because a lot of it is just sort of redescribing core bits of Yang push, but I would look at the early sections that identify what's actually changed. And the key point here that I've mentioned a few times now is at the moment it uses a new module namespace rather than the either subscribe notifications or Yang push namespaces for the modules. And that means that a load of simplification can happen in terms of that Yang module, but it also means that it can coexist as a separate implementation. So there would be some migration effort from implementations that are implementing Yang push today to Yang push Lite, but I still have the opinion that those implementation efforts and changes shouldn't be that great for people who are implementing for the sort of observability and telemetry projects, given that we're going to have to move as well if this goes forward. So, so the doc structure effectively has got a summary of open issues in section 3, chapter 3. So that's worth reviewing. That's effectively the list of things I think are useful to discuss and get opinions and feedback on. I think it'd be very useful to look at section 5, the introduction of this document, that talks primarily in section 5.4, which is the functional changes between Yang push Lite and Yang push. I've listed there 3 subsections, which tells you what this changed functionality is, what the removed functionality is, and what the added functionality is. Now, I'll go over some of this in more detail today until I run out of time or in terms of what questions come in. But effectively, those will be the bits of the document that are both most worth looking at because they will give you most insight as to what's changing. The rest of the document, oh yes, sorry, the last one that's worth looking at is the Yang push Lite Yang tree and Yang model. They're not perfect at the moment. They still need some further tweaks, but again, they give you a very good idea of what the model looks like and where we're going to. I should warn you though, there's examples in the appendix, but they're out of date. I've not updated those yet. But the other bits of the tree that you find in the documents, including these sections on the right, the main structure, are pulling those out of the Yang push Lite module. So they should be pretty much correct or in the right direction. And then I've restructured the main structure of the document on the right-hand side. So I'll give you an overview of the protocol definitions, which again, these are pulled from the existing 39 and 41. They probably need to be cleaned up and remove some of those. And then I've got sensor paths and selection filters section, one that talks about event streams, which again is now just tied just to data store event streams. It doesn't handle generic event streams. A section on receivers, transports, and encodings. Setting up and managing subscriptions, the subscription lifecycle notifications, what those are, what they look like, performance reliability and subscription monitoring. Excuse me. So this is sort of a new thing here. I want to include more OPA data in this model to monitor subscriptions, and so you don't have this sort of negotiation for dynamic subscriptions as to whether you can support it or not. You expect some more operational data as to what the telemetry load is on the device to be able to say, yes, you can support it or not. And then chapter 14 is conformance and capability. So that's referencing the capabilities model that Thomas and Benoit are talking about. So I expect that to be referenced in here as the sort of primary way in Yang push Lite is how you advertise these things. So that go that direction. And then section 15 is the Yang model, the tree, and the model itself. Right, so now I've got, I can't remember how it's 8 slides maybe here that goes through each of these sections and tells you roughly what's changed, what's been removed and what's added. Now, none of this is set in stone. This is all just ideas and a starting point, and I'm happy to take feedback on any of these as I go. So for sensor paths and selection filters, the main thing I've changed is to sort of, is trying to simplify the data model. So I want to remove anything to do with the selection filters related to non-data store event streams. So that just sort of disappears. I've removed the ability to filter event streams other than filtering the data store. And I'm proposing removing XPath filtering. And instead of that, I would like to add a new basic path filtering, which is basically like an almost like an instance data path where each key on that path can either be a fixed value or a regex expression to constrain the key value, or a wildcard for any key value. So it's sort of the path that I normally see when people choose the telemetry paths, which you often describe as like XPath, but it's sort of like a cut down version. So I'm proposing that we define what this is. I don't think it's particularly complicated, and that replaces the XPath one. I've also added the ability in the data model you'll see to add multiple target paths in selection filter. so that you don't have to have a single path. You can have multiple ones, because again, that's a request, I think, from a couple of the operators. They thought that was useful. And I need to add in like the module schema version selection as well. So I think that's been supported at the moment. We need to look at exactly how that gets fed in. The other change here in terms of sensor piles, and this is one of the big changes in the document of Yang Push Lite, is it allows a device to effectively decompose a given filter into something or multiple simpler filters, and then to be able to generate the notifications based on those simpler filters. So what I mean by that is, if you had a subscription that's very high up the tree, say you subscribe to just IETF interfaces, then if you have lots of different models augmenting IETF interfaces in different places, you'd be able to decompose that subscription at the high level into sort of sub-subscriptions or decomposed subscriptions that allow the device to be sending the notifications for each of those sub-subscriptions separately, or I was going to say decomposed subscriptions separately. And that's to allow, basically allow more performant implementations, and to avoid this requirement that Yang Push has, where for the periodic updates, you're required to return the entire tree at the subscription point. So if your subscription was to like the root of the tree, the requirement is that for Yang Push is that you return all the operational data in a single response every time that the periodic counter goes off. So, so that's what this is trying to achieve. But that's one of the areas that probably needs more discussion and more thought exactly how that works. But it's also similar to how we're implemented today. Yes, Thomas, go ahead.
Just one remark on the added functionality. So we need to be careful there that basically the selected path is then mappable to a subscription ID, because at the end we are mapping a subscription ID to a Yang schema ID.
Yes, as in, I think as in you need to know what the schema is associated with that combined set of multiple paths. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Let me just make a note. Okay, yeah. Okay, fine. Right, on to the next one. The data store event stream. So this again has got quite big changes in terms of what's this, but at the sort of syntactic level rather than what's necessarily fundamentally changing. So what's changing? The on-change patch format is going to go away. I don't think that works well for the operational data. The support for on-change events, rather than the existing choice of what Yang Push in terms of being a replace or a merge or a create or delete, that sort of thing, it's going to change for on-change events to either be this exists and it has this value, or this data node doesn't exist anymore. So it becomes a much simpler binary choice. There is, we've taken away client configurable dampening, so that disappears, you can't configure it, but we do allow the publisher currently to dampen events on change, which is sort of what it would do naturally. So an example of that would be, we have a carrier transition counter in our hardware that tells you every time an interface flaps. Now, on our hardware, at times when a physical interface is coming up beneath an interface, you may find that flaps maybe 10,000 times in a second. Now, obviously, you don't want to generate 10,000 events through the system, and you want to generate 10,000 notifications all within 1 second. So naturally, a device would be expected to dampen that down, and it does before it reports it. So what I'm saying here in terms of one thing that's added is that we take away client configurable dampening, but we allow the publisher to dampen events as appropriate so that you don't overload clients. So it makes it more tied into the data model. I've taken away the replaying of buffered events, so that it means that effectively you are just publishing the data that's there, and the expectation with Yang Push Lite is if your transport session gets full or you get back pressured, then you just tear down the subscription. That doesn't make any sense to try and buffer this data for very long, because you can't do it, and instead you just end up serving stale data to the client. So those things have gone away. What stuff have we changed? Well, there's only the data store event stream. So the non-data store event stream, that disappears. We don't need that. We're going to use the new notification envelope format that we were discussing earlier. also requiring host name and sequence number. The plan is that this is non-optional. All these notifications will always use that, won't be configurable. There's a new combined update notification that replaces the push update and push change update, I think it is, that's used for both on-change and periodic subscriptions. And structurally, I've got it, it's later on the slides. Structurally, it's much closer to the periodic than the on-change messages, and it can have multiple updates. So for on-change, we allow multiple updates to be included, and each of those updates identifies the subtree that's being changed. And lastly on this, one more proposal is to allow a common prefix to be specified at the top of that, so that rather than encoding the JSON data from the root of the data store tree, you can encode it from lower down, for example, maybe the subscription point. So I think that was another thing that would be good to have lots of discussion on. The target path here in terms of what we're identifying, I want to move this to something like a JSON instance identifier path rather than more like an XPath style. So that's something else I want to discuss. I might try and get a separate draft to discuss this more generally because there's other places that would be useful. I think the last one I sort of covered. Yes, Rashad.
So that common prefix part, it's been a while since I looked at GNMI. That's what GNMI does, right?
Yes, exactly. GNMI has that. And there's other reasons we had that. The reason it sort of came in is that when you start to do on-change notifications, it becomes much nicer if the thing you're identifying that's changing, like a list entry, ends up being the top of the JSON rather than halfway down. So again, I can't sort of describe it very well here, but that was one of the reasons that drove me towards that.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks.
So we've added common path prefix. I've said that. Combined periodic and on-change subscription. That's so the clients can handle them in the same sort of way. And I think it works reasonably nicely. I've mentioned the decomposing subscriptions and I mentioned dampening. Yes, Thomas.
Just one comment on having multiple updates in one message. That has implications downstream on the YANG push receiver or further down the data processing chain, because we need to reassemble that, because at the end we need each basically message we need a timestamp. So I'm not sure whether we are moving the problem more down in here if we do that or not.
Yes, and we'll need to, that one definitely needs more thought on things like that. So I think the case of where I thought that was useful was with the on-change patch format today. If multiple interfaces change at the same time, we'll generate a single notification with multiple patch updates within that one message. And that's the one thing that you would lose in terms of having a single update message. If you didn't have that, you'd have to send separate messages. And if you had something that was changed, a lot of things were changing together, like 10,000 things were changing together, it might be better to send one message rather than 10,000 individual messages. But definitely further discussion, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. I see the problem. Thanks.
And I agree with your timestamp thing as well. Yes, maybe we need to embed a timestamp lower down. So, but it's an interesting area. So carrying on, receivers, transports, and encodings. So we've removed the QoS weighting and dependencies between subscriptions. I think that's too complex and it's not needed. And nothing's been added. We have basically moved the receiver config so it's all separate from the subscription. And the transport encoding is configured under the receiver rather than under the subscription. And this is for configured subscriptions. For dynamic subscriptions, it's sort of implicit, other than the encoding. The DSCP is set under the receiver, but again, there's a question mark as to whether we should allow the DSCP bits to be set under a subscription to override the receiver. So again, feedback on that would be useful. And again, if a subscription uses multiple receivers, I think that the existing YANG push is very flexible with that. I want to try and constrain it so that they must all use the same encoding, possibly use the same transport DSCP bits. I don't know about that one, the second one. And the goal here was to ensure that you can use the same sequence number for all the messages that you send out if you're using multiple receivers. And again, if you thinking back or look at Thomas's diagram where he's trying to do the full sort of telemetry stack, I think for that to work, you need to be using the same sequence number IDs, even if you go to multiple receivers. So that's something that I think that is important here for further discussion. And it does have an impact on the FSM, the state machine, in terms of the Anchorage subscription management. Yes, Benoit.
So on the SCPs, something I've been mentioning multiple times is that somehow what we're doing here is that we're making Yang push similar to IPFix, right? More and more. Now in IPFix, we have no way, I mean, there is no use case to have a separate DSCP per template record. So I don't see there is even a need here to have different DSCP per subscription. So just making per receiver. Yeah, that's my feedback.
Okay, thank you. If I don't hear anyone else saying any comment, what will be the direction I go in?
Yeah, +1 also on that one. And I wanted just to mention encryption also the same. I think it should be on the receiver.
Yes.
Transport, encoding, DSCP. Yeah.
And definitely my goal overall here is we should be trying to make this as simple as possible as we can to solve the requirements and no more complexity. And then we can add in further complexity in future if we get to the point where we got demand for it. I'm going to run out of time, I'm afraid, today, but I'll try and get through. Setting up and managing subscriptions. So this is interesting. I've removed the modify subscription RPC from the dynamic subscriptions. My plan is just to not have it at all. And if you need to change the dynamic subscription, you just tear it down and reestablish a new one. A possible alternative to that would be to allow the established subscription to override an existing subscription, but you would need to be able to pass in the subscription ID. So there's some interesting thoughts there. I've got Ben. Have you sort of comment on this one, or Kent?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering. So we're carrying forward the idea of dynamic subscriptions. I'm wondering, is that really needed? Configured subscriptions seem to be critical. Are dynamic subscriptions needed at all for Yang Push Lite?
So my understanding was there's still a requirement for them, that some people still want them, and I certainly know that for Holger, go on, you'll be better. Give me a better answer here.
Honestly, I wanted to say quickly, yes, it is needed. I think it is from a change point of view. If you have managed subscriptions, you have to configure it, and the change process is quite complicated somehow. And dynamic subscriptions are much easier to handle if you are in the network and you want to collect something very urgent.
But one other further comment on that is my aim is to try and, I don't know if it comes in this slide or later on, is to try and align dynamic and configured subscriptions as much as possible. So they use the same state machine, they use the same states, and as much as possible, they're very, very similar. Whereas I think in the Yang push today, there's more deviation and difference in behavior between the two. So I'm trying to align those two.
This is something I would support. Yeah.
So we mentioned receiver config is separate from the subscription in terms of what's changed. That's fine. I've removed bits of the data model from 8639, which we don't need. That's fine. Simplified it. I've aligned the life cycle of them, as I say here. And I've ditched the sort of suspend and resume of subscriptions for dynamic subscriptions. Again, I don't think that, and again, even for configured, I don't think that's necessary. So again, we're trying to simplify. If the publisher cannot keep a subscription going, it basically tears it down. It'll terminate the subscription, either dynamic one will tell the client, or for configured one, it will kill the subscription. And for configured one, it would then retry it on a periodic basis until it can sort of bring it back. And then the one last thing on here that's interesting is whether the subscription IDs using numeric IDs is the right choice there, or whether we should be trying to use something like a string name for them instead, particularly for the configured subscriptions. And that would potentially allow for a cleaner namespace split between configured and dynamic. Yes, Holger.
Again, that is very nice, because I would like to add this to the draft. This would be one of my proposals. So very nice.
What configured names?
Names, yes.
Yeah.
Much easier than handling just numbers if you search for something.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. Right, next slide. So we're right at the time. So chairs, do you want me to carry on? Do you want me to stop? What would you like to do?
Per, go ahead. I have to drop myself, but Per.
I can stay, but it depends on if a lot of people need to drop. Then I think it should be fair to cut.
So okay, fine. So I'll flick through these so people can read them. They're the same ones in the document. So I'll go through these other ones, capabilities and conformance, talk about those. And then there's the tree here. So I've sort of split it out to the tree. You can see this is the whole of the Anchorage-like config opera tree, all fits on one slide. It's quite a lot shorter. I then do the same thing for the RPCs and notifications again, so you can see what the structure is. And those are in that document reference then as well. So you can see those in the document. I've said here, it sounds like a lot of changes, but it really isn't. The core part of the protocol is the same. I'm putting in lots of extensions, the same basic data model, but in a new namespace. There are changes to the periodic notifications. They're relatively minor, except for splitting them up the messages, but we're doing that anyway. The on-change changes are probably the ones where it's sort of bigger and more changes. And the next steps for me is I'm trying to get authors together. Hopefully we'll have a meeting later this week to start discussing some of this and getting people involved. My goal is to move reasonably fast. I'm happy to act as like an editor to try and push this along. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Let's give it a few minutes if there are any quick questions.
Sorry if I've been speaking too quickly. And thanks for the feedback today.
So any more comments for Rob? I actually read the slides beforehand and that helped the speedy presentation. So I understood what we were discussing.
And for the chairs, if there's time, I know you haven't asked for a request for IETF 122, but yes, I'm happy to try and spend some time on this depending on how much you've got. I know it's not an adopted item, but.
Paolo, you're in queue.
Yeah, I had only one comment, which is partly something probably we already discussed. I especially appreciate the fact of the simplification of the expat.
You're very quiet. I'm struggling to hear you, Paolo.
Oh, okay. Is it any better?
Yes, it's a bit better. Yes.
Oh, fantastic. So sorry. I was saying I wanted just to make one comment, which I really appreciate the simplification of the expat filtering. This is something that we may have discussed in the past, but it's something that as an implementer, as an operator, I saw already with NETCONF, right? The fact that you have very complex expat filtering prevents vendors from implementing expat filtering, and then you have to do subtree filtering, which is very annoying, at least for me. So I think that really simplifying the expat filtering is the right way to go. Boost adoption of expat filtering among users.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I have one last question as a contributor, maybe. Do you need to remove XPath filtering, or can we just keep it anyway?
Yes, I don't know. So I haven't taken it out of the document today. It can obviously be under a feature, so it could still be there. I don't know. I think for me, the key one is when it comes down to, I would like to try and specify what the minimum functionality that everyone's expected to implement, i.e. everyone should support X, Y, and Z. And I'd like to say the simple filtering is something that everyone has to support, and subtree filtering or maybe XPath is optional. So I don't know to that question.
So you don't want to have the document conditional of feature set, that the entire document should be possible to implement for everyone?
I don't know if there'll be feature sets in here. I think my hope was to say there's must statements saying you must implement this, i.e. or strong should statements, and then in places where it would be, you must support simple filtering, you may support XPath, you may support subtree filtering, something like that. But we could do it a different way. We could do it like a conformance profile at the end that said that, this is a conformance profile, or we could do that outside in a separate document. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that answers my question. I guess there's a discussion to be had on how to handle it.
I think there's loads of discussion on this.
Yes.
We
So
done?
chair-wise then, if there are no more comments, we thank you all for today. There are now some action points that need to be taken care of. Any final questions, comments?
No, thanks for hosting.
Thank you, and sorry for all the audio trouble today. Thank you very much.
Bye. Bye all.
Take care.